Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Two words were mentioned: meditation, dhyanam, and contemplation, nididhyasanam. Can someone point out what was the difference between the two? Good, good. So what is meditation term in Vedanta? If we remember, it's saguna. So saguna Brahman, and that is so that means Ishvara. That's Ishvara. And what's the topic of meditation? That's the Vishaya. So saguna Brahma Vishaya. So the topic of meditation is Ishvara, and it is conducted by Manasam, by the Manasam Vyaparaha. Vyaparaha just means it's done by the mind. That means it's an actual action which is done by the mind regarding the topic of Ishvara. And we said that meditation, dhyanam, I'm just writing these words down because I want you to familiarize yourself. Other teachers will also say the same words, so I don't want you to say, oh, what's dhyanam? So dhyanam is meditation. And we said meditation is an action. Okay? What kind of action? Performed by the mind. And we said that action is always going to have three kinds of results, or three kinds of possible actions. I can do, not do, or do differently. Okay? And each one of them performed by the mind, which is going to focus on Ishvara, is going to give you some result. Okay? But the result is going to be limited in nature. It doesn't mean don't do it, because you need a lovely, clean mind. And we use two words. I'm just revising some Sanskrit terms because I want to, part of the tradition. It comes from Sanskrit. It's my job to bring out these words. I'm not going to teach just in English because I'm not that kind of teacher. So, Purusha Tantra. So, Purusha Tantra just means that action depends on the person. Okay? So the action depends on the person's free will. Person's free will. And free will is always going to be do something, don't do something, or do something different. And that is always going to be done by the mind, and it's always going to give you a limited action. Therefore, meditation is Purusha Tantra. So it is, you can choose to meditate, not meditate, or meditate differently, but either way, it's going to give you a limited result. And then when it comes to nididhyasanam, which is in English called contemplation, we said that is called Vastu Tantram. I'm going to write the word Vastu Tantram. Okay? So this means that here there is no question of free will, because this Vastu, for example, H2O, that's a fact. And if I want to discover a fact, I have no choice. My free will is not an option. I can call water, Coke, Fanta, this or that. My free will to choose what water is makes no difference to the water. The water is going to be water. Therefore, here, what I have to do is I have to align my understanding to the nature of the object. So as far as free will is concerned, it basically involves sitting down with an intention to understand. That's why we say Shravanam is deeply ascertaining what is being listened to. Therefore, when it comes to the reality of Brahman, it's not a question of someone telling you what is Brahman and then you believing it, but that's why we need the scriptures, that which is common and attributeless. And I have no choice but to understand it as that. And when I do, that's called knowledge. In other words, when I've captured the nature of self as it is, that is called knowledge. That means what the mind knows and what is conveyed, what is intended to be conveyed, they are keeping, they are one and the same. There's no discrepancy. Okay. So this Vastu and Purusha Tantram, that's the connection between meditation, which is limited result, and contemplation gives you a limitless result. Why? How is Nididhyasanam, which is Vastu Tantram, going to give you a limitless result if you're only discovering that water is water? You can't. You have to discover something, the nature of I. So only when you discover the nature of I, only then it becomes a limitless result. Okay. So that's just some technical language that familiarize you a little bit.
You mean discover it, Nididhyasana. You say discover the nature of Brahman.
Yeah, that's needed. So that's the purpose of Nididhyasanam.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's, the method is the identification. I am.
Yeah. So that's the truth. That is the truth. Yeah, which is always here and now.
It's being in the truth.
Yeah, knowing yourself to be that. Yeah.
Yes.
So therefore, coming to that place, right, understanding that you are already free of, the seeker, you're already free of the seeker, you're already free of the meditator, then that involves a methodology. It involves contemplation. So Nididhyasanam is always associated to the word pramana. Okay? So whenever you hear the pramana, which is means of knowledge, it's always associated to contemplation. It's like this anywhere. Medicine or mathematics, it's nothing but pramana. Mathematics is a certain structure. Learn this, learn this, learn this, learn this. And then you have a big picture developed in your mind. It's no different than Vedanta. It's nothing special. So verse 18 is going to talk about how do we build a mature mind? Desires. Okay, verse 18. Yada viniyatam chittam atmanyeva vatishtate nikspraha sarvakamepyaha yukta ityuchyate tada. So far we've learned about things like following Dharma, the importance of doing the right thing, because this system is designed such that if I live by the laws, just like when the plant, right, lives right in nature with the world, that means it receives the sunlight, it receives the water, then the plant is able to continue thriving. If the plant decided, I don't want to, nourish myself with the water, I don't like the sun, I'm going to block the sun, in that sense, the plant will be violating Dharma. So Dharma is always for your own well-being. In our case, Dharma means looking at our responses. Where's my response arising out of? From what place is my response to this challenge coming from? From what place is my understanding or need to give something an opinion? Where is that coming from? And why does it want to just so much box something up in my little world? So you're looking at that response and you're reframing that so that you can see the order of Ishvara. It is not just a person. There's much more to the person than meets the eye. So in other words, we are accommodating a certain person or a character or a situation. And that means to accommodate that you understand that everything has one of those four possible outcomes. And it cannot possibly give you always what you want or more than what you want, but sometimes it's going to give you much less than you want, and sometimes totally opposite. And this is regarding your boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, wife, children, employer, employees. Everything is going to be like this. So this means there's a certain composure that reality is supposed to give me all four. It cannot just give me two. This is called pratibhasika. The moment I get rid of my pratibhasika, what happens is two more get added. Okay? Therefore, this is coming back to the world. We also said converting our sense of ownership into trusteeship. In other words, I was and you were endowed with this body. The body was not something that was you designed. It was literally given to you. Here, my dear child, here's a body to work out your stuff. And hopefully you will use it to the best of your ability and you won't misuse it. But when we forget this, then we start to misuse the body. We misuse the lips, misuse the brain, misuse this machine, and throw things onto the world. Therefore, by understanding, I was endowed this instrument with the greatest intelligence, the only intelligence in the universe. Your relationship starts to change to your very body and mind. Your instrument is an endowment of Ishvara. It's a sacred temple. And when we go to a temple, what do? We take off our shoes. We take those things that are dirty because there's a certain understanding. This is a holy temple and I come in with reverence. So just like that, you, Atma, are inhering this body, temple, with a certain reverence. And until I understand this is a temple that I'm carrying, literally walking around with a temple that has the instrument to speak and talk, until I understand that, my relationship with the very temple would be slightly distorted. So this means we have to remember our temple. Okay. Now, nixprahaha sarva kamepyaha. So this is talking about our relationship with desire. So what needs to, rather than saying eliminate desire, what we say desires have to graduate. From eliminate to graduate. Just like child graduates their desires from toys, girls, thinking about these things, those things, they have to graduate. One of the questions that is a taboo topic that spiritual seekers sometimes ask is, what should be the relationship to porn? And they have no one to ask this. And that too is what we call a binding desire. A binding desire is something that holds the person back from living a life of a shameless life, a life that is without shame, a life that is clean, that doesn't experience any guilt. And they ask this question because they're in conflict. They have this desire for divinity, and yet there's this carnal drive that keeps on pulling them back into this sort of a carnal expression. So this can become one of those binding desires that contradicts the fact that this is a temple. Therefore, there's nothing wrong with desires as such, because you are endowed with you're endowed with the power to desire. This is called Icha Shakti, power to know, Jnana Shakti, power to do, Kriya Shakti. Everyone has these three powers. You can desire anything, but that will only happen based on what you know. And based on what you know and what you desire, you will then do. Therefore, these three powers are given to every human being. Can I eliminate them? No. Just like I can't eliminate the sun, I can't eliminate my power to desire. I remember in my early years, I had one of my best friends was a Buddhist monk, and a little bit kind of taught me so much. But one thing that I always found confusing is there was this notion that you need to totally be desireless, and I just couldn't agree with that. There was something in me that was not matching that, and that really turned me off, because it was like this walking with this monotonous person, right? Just no desire. And so you're kind of destroying the human experience. So Vedanta never says eliminate desires. It only becomes problematic when we don't use those desires responsibly. Now, what do I mean by this? So every desire nourishes you. Desires nourish you, actually, if you think about it. But now I have to understand what is it that my goal, what is it that that I'm here for? What is my purpose? In reference to your purpose, I align my desires. My desires subserve my purpose. Now, there is something called, again, binding desires. And what is a binding desire? Well, the word binding is a giveaway. It pulls you back, it binds you. It takes a lot of one's time. And they know it's taking a lot of time, and there's very little one can do about it. They know it's not healthy, but they still do it anyway. And you just keep on, wishing, oh my God, I want to release myself. I want to release myself from this. But this desire keeps on, like I said, in the porn, which is very prevalent nowadays, keeps on 40% of the traffic in our sea cables is porn. This is amazing. Look at this. Huge. So it's a huge binding desire, just this carnal drive. And so it keeps on pulling the individual, distracting them constantly. Thereby, the person needs to relieve themselves from this binding desire because it's not serving the individual's expression as someone that's clean, someone that's pure, someone that's able to be strong and say, no, I choose not to do this. I am in the driver's seat. I don't have to do this. And there's a great power being in the driver's seat and saying no to the desire which most men cannot handle. They just go for. Or, women also have the same thing in some different expressions. And there's a great satisfaction that you get by being able to say no to that which most world says yes to. Gossip, no. Porn, no. Need to put things into boxes, no. Need to put some, drivers, irresponsible drivers, into some box, no. And you gain great strength to say no to what most world says yes to. And that's healthy, gives you a healthy self-esteem. There's an example of a binding desire that now that we're on this relationship issue. There was a real life story. I will tell you a real life story later. But suppose there is a husband. So after 10 years or so of marriage, right, the relationship kind of cools down. Now it becomes normal. The romance starts to die out. Now suppose the man, he wants a little bit of that initial spark, and he goes to work. And he finds some, attractive lady there who works with him, and he's spending time with him, with her daily there, and he builds that attraction. And then all of that, this binding desire, I want to connect, and he gives in. And the first, how does it start? With a little flirtatious smile. And then after the flirtatious smile, what happens then? Oh, after work, let's go and, invite you to a coffee. And then another coffee, and then slowly, it's a kiss. And slowly, there's now a man who's having a relationship with a woman, and he comes back to his home, and his wife, knowing him for many years, senses something's going on. And she says, you're no longer communicating with me, you're clearly hiding something. And what happens with the man? He now has to defend himself. All of that now fear starts to come out, and defending oneself, and showing how you're always suspicious of me. What is this? You don't trust me. I'm your husband. I've been with you for 20 years. So all of that stuff from one simple thing now comes. So just when the man thought he can outsmart Ishvara, Ishvara outsmarts the man. How so? By bringing out fear, apprehension, anger, conflict. So therefore, you cannot outsmart Ishvara because it always brings the corresponding emotion in you. And it is felt and it is unavoidable. Therefore, you're keeping in check of binding desires for whose sake? For your own sake. As I said, there's a great strength. A man and a woman, a true man, true woman, a great strength saying no. I've done this, no. Therefore, it's done for yourself. And that strength is, vastly healthy. I read this book by Swami Shivananda called Brahmacharin. And, he makes a good point there. Why is it that the rishis have such an amazing memory? And many people think, well, because they're rishis, wow, there's a reason. They know how to hold that seed inside. Just, that seed coming out all the time has a big impact on the memory. And when I read this long time ago, I thought, wow. And it, left an impression on me. And memory goes through the roof. It really does. Why are rishis so, able to remember? Because they know how to just rest and not, fall for these lower drives. So this is wonderful. And if you have a great memory, then you can, remember so many things and connect the dots. So you see how it's all connected. Now, how do you convert binding desire into non-binding desire? Well, suppose you have to go to work and it's binding you to go to work. You need to pay for the bills. So that, in a sense, is a binding desire, isn't it? How do I convert that binding desire into a non-binding desire? How would you convert that situation into a quote, a non-binding desire, or turn it into a benefit? More than just money, yeah. Karma yoga. Okay, would you like to expand on that? How is that?
Intention I go to work with. So when I'm at work, I can serve Ishvara all day by the things I do, the intentions I do. It's one place of practice.
Good. So in other words, by going to work, you're getting a chance every day to develop your communication skills. You're getting a chance to be triggered every single day, to experience challenges. And every time you experience challenges, I can bring in the order of Ishvara. And I can understand it's not personal. It's not about me. Just a person that has their own pressures, and those pressures are now projected onto me, and I have to remain cool. I have to stay cool without getting ruffled about it. I have to do what is to be done, handle the situation, retain my objectivity, just do what has to be done and continue.
One of the nice things of Osho's commune, we called work worship. And at that time I didn't really understand the deeper meaning. But now in review, I think that's beautiful to call your work that you do daily worship, like it's worship Ishvara.
Yeah, so it's a worship. It's a devotion to the altar of Ishvara. Okay, so this is simple attitude. You're not changing your actions, but simply an attitudinal change. I am always serving Ishvara, the one who has been helping me since beginningless time to come to this stage now. This is a very real-life example. I thought this was very simple, but a good way to convert binding desire. Again, it was a work situation, and now this time it was a woman who fell in love with a man at work, and she was married, and she had kids. And she thought, oh no, I'm falling in love with this man. He's so charming, and I've got, all these funny feelings. And what does she do? Because she had this, she wants to connect with him. And what does she do? She invited him home to meet her husband, for him to meet her husband. And what happened? Her husband and him became good friends. And now, as they came together, like weekly or, monthly, she saw, because she's so close to him, such business as usual. She lost all of that, right, attraction by the mere dynamic change of relationship. I thought this was brilliant, right? So this is intelligent management of binding desires. Because usually for us, it's either hold it all in and suffer. Like, no, suffer. Or just let it and explode. Okay? Two extremes. It's always that in between, the smart way. Therefore, binding desires are there. We may have them, we may not have them, but management is always a matter of finding those nuances, being intelligent about it. Okay. So now, what will managing desires do for you? Verse 19. Yatha dipo nivatastaha nengate sopama smrta yogino yatachittasya Yunjato yogam atmanaha.
I want to read, a lamp protected from the wind does not tremble. This illustration is cited for the composed mind of the meditator who practices contemplation of the self.
Okay, nice. So here, if you have a lamp with holes and you have a flame inside, if you take that flame, if you take that lamp outside where you have winds blowing from all directions, then as much as you intend to protect that flame, even a small hole is going to ruffle that, move that flame. And that flame is compared to your mind. So the more holes I have, the more binding desires and unaddressed issues that I'm to work out, that I have in my mind, the more if I go out into the real world, one little challenge throws me off. Another challenge throws me off. So this is a nice metaphor, what it means to be sensitive enough to plug those holes. Where are my binding desires? Where do I lose my composure? What situation throws me off? What does somebody say that when they say it, it throws me off? What is that? What do they do that throws me off? How do they say it that throws me off? How do they look like that throws me off? Okay, so once being sensitive to all of these nuances that makes our mind move in the winds of challenges in the world. So thus, by this one flame, right, of knowledge, one flame of mind management, the psychology, how to manage your mind, it plugs those holes, which is why working on your mind is so important. Verse 23, tam vidyad dukkha sanyoga viyogam yoga samjnitam sanishchayena yoktavyaha yogo nirvinnachetasa. So dukkha sanyoga viyoga. So directly this means disillusion from union with pain. So what happens is we're like in a stage of, right, a little bit confused. You're in a stage of, this is my pain. This is my pain. This is my life, my suffering, my sadness, my joy. And this my and joy, they're so together that there's no cognitive space in between. So it's like, it's literally mine. So when it says here a yogi, who is a yogi? Who is the one who has mastery of the mind, who has plugged these holes in the lamp? Well, they firstly acknowledge a passing emotion, a passing experience. They acknowledge it. It's going to come in your life, whether you like it or not. However, it's not mistaken as I am. There is no that kind of, it's mine, it's mine. There's a cognitive space between my pain and I. And it's not some theory that we're saying now, oh, this is how it is for yogi. It's a genuine living reality. There is an I and there is pain. And there is as though a cognitive distance between them. Not an actual distance like I'm here and there's pain over there. It's right here. But the way that the pain is understood is it's not mine. And this makes it much easier for the yogi to manage all of these conditions that are going through their body. And now, if something keeps coming over and over again, then there was once a question asked, and I thought it was a good question. Do you dismiss it and you just say, and it's recurring, right? It's a pattern that is painful and it's recurring. Do you A, say, this is just coming in my presence, it's not really mine? Or do you B, recognize it that it's an unresolved pattern and you actually dissolve it, you actually work on it? Which one? Yeah, you see, B. In other words, a yogi doesn't merely dismiss it as I'm free of this stuff. If it's coming once in a while, that's fine. But if it's reoccurring, it's an indicator this is what is to be worked on. So we're not discarding A, but we're not discarding B. There's a place for all of them. So again, if it's once in a while, all of these thoughts that are not yours, by the way, sometimes you're just a channel. You're just a channel for global thoughts. Sometimes they're global thoughts and sometimes they're personal thoughts. They're not all your thoughts. Sometimes we have a collective world who is all undergoing a certain rhythm of like a wave. A wave. And you think, oh, I'm going through a hard time, but everyone is in a small degree or another experiencing the same wave as you are. And we don't think of it like this because we're always like the world is centered on me. Remember, collectively shared karma. You collectively share the same thoughts in your own family, don't you? With your partner. There's a relative collective shared thought. Within a family, there's a relatively collective shared thought. Within a community, there's a relatively collective shared thought. Within a nation, within a country, within the world. So not all thoughts are yours. So one can spend their whole life cleaning up their mind, going, oh my God, so many negative thoughts, but they're not yours. For the yogi, they understand my instrument is just sending me new thoughts. Sometimes they're mine, sometimes they are the collective. And therefore, there is a certain space. This is just a passing thought in the presence of me, let it go. But if it's reoccurring, it's most likely yours. How long does this take? Nishchayena, which means with perseverance. Therefore, how long do I have to? If it's passing, work on it, dissolve it with persistence, as long as it takes. And then verse 24 and 25, I won't chant because it's very short. It says, therefore, give up all desires. Look at this, literal meaning. Therefore, give up all desires and only think of Atma. In other words, only contemplate on Atma. Now, the second section is fine, but the first one, give up all desires. What do you have to fill in there for it to make sense? Give up all binding desires. This is how the scriptures work. So rather than relieving your mind and having this thoughtless mode, right, I have to look at those binding desires. Okay, now I want to revise. Let us all together go through some things of how to manage the mind. This is called group work now. So, what are the practices that we can go through, or scriptural recommendations, or ways of living, of how to live a clean life? Give me some ideas.
Housekeeping.
Okay, housekeeping. What does housekeeping mean? Like physical space, physical clean space? Keeping, yeah, clean. So clean house. Okay, house clean. Because it will affect your mind, right? If you got disorganized stuff all over. And that's why people vacuum their house, at least in the Western world. It doesn't happen in other countries, to clean up your own mind.
Leading a simple life so that you have time to study.
Simple. What is simple like? More specific, simple life.
Without too many different occupations, businesses, relationships,
Right.
hobbies.
Right, okay. So only like keep the essentials. Right, essentials. Keep essentials. Good?
Being in nature.
Okay, being in nature. Being in nature. Of course, this can be, yeah, it's subjective. Some people like to be, anywhere, but
Discipline. Daily discipline.
yeah, daily discipline. So what does this mean? Daily discipline? Expand?
Well, for example, we always do our daily morning ritual. It's like really opening the day and then start reading scripture, do a meditation.
Okay, so consistency.
And day on day on day, and then it becomes a joy.
Super. So day by day, I'm going to put here day by day. And if you miss a day, should you be ruffled about that? Should you be disturbed? No. Which is also part of, right, one of the practices, not to be...
What belong to that is also making conscious choices, I realize. For example, if the evening comes and you well, what should I do now? Now you can watch television if you want to.
So deliberate thinking.
Yeah, deliberate thinking.
Deliberate thinking, okay.
Or do something else.
Deliberate thinking. So deliberate thinking, what is deliberate thinking? It means that, do I have any evidence to support this right now? Mechanical thinking is, let me just think of it how it is. The moment you intercept it, what real proof do I have that this is true? Now it becomes deliberate.
Stick to your goal.
Hmm?
Stick to your goal. If you have to have a goal.
Okay, goal. So higher
Eating sattvic.
higher purpose, right? Higher purpose, goal. Higher goal. Okay, higher goal. So this means
Eating sattvic food.
super. So eating. Could you expand why?
It makes your consciousness light and free from all kinds of rubbish.
Yeah, this is excellent because, right, meat is meat, but, it can be sometimes heavy on the system and it gives brain fog and it makes a person tired. But some people, I tell you, they thrive. They thrive on anything. So again, right, tamasic, sattvic, rajasic, this is fine. In other words, what kind of food makes my brain work? What kind of food keeps me in a just a energized, a generally equanimous, general energy state throughout the day? What kind of food? This much I have to know. So we're not about saying eat this, eat that, but there is truth in eating clean, fresh food.
Rearrange your to-do list, put moksha.
Reprioritize, okay. Reprioritize. In other words, change your priorities. In other words, I'm looking, what is it that enriches my life? Sometimes we need to ask this question so that we can bring certain things that enrich our life at the top. And everything else, right, can be secondary to that. So I have to rearrange those things that I treasure, and they are there for me. And allow time for that to actually come into your life. Okay?
Having healthy boundaries.
Healthy boundaries.
When it comes to social life.
Yeah, so healthy boundaries, this means expand, right? So not to give in to those things that don't serve your highest purpose. That don't, healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries. Anything else? Huh? Dedication we had here, Simon said, who said, what, discipline? Discipline, he says discipline. So deliberate thinking, daily discipline, and I'm going to put here dedication. Okay, what is it that you personally do? This I want to know.
Exercise the muscle of gratitude. Like I think what I'm grateful for, at least two things.
Right. Gratitude. Okay, super. So in other words, what is working in my life? What is bringing me joy?
Vedanta group.
Okay. Yeah, Vedanta. Okay.
So I
More.
also thought not running away from things that trigger you. So be courageous also when there are fears, especially like the thing you told me.
So this is also deliberate thinking, right? Not running away. I'll put it under deliberate thinking.
Good company, good friends.
This would be with group, company.
Sangha.
Yeah, company, Sangha. Yeah.
Sadhana,
Petra?
doing the sadhana, pranayamas, meditation.
Right. So
Things that calms the mind.
okay, so I'm going to put here yoga. Yoga is, basically encompassing everything you said. Meditation, sadhana, asana. So yoga, right? Personal yoga, the one that makes sense to you.
Contact with nature.
Contact with nature. We had here, someone said at the back, nature. Be with the nature.
Prayer.
Prayer is super. Yep, prayer. Prayer?
Let's say help and support others, whether it's a friend, a neighbor, or a stranger.
Reach out. In other words, reaching out. I'll put reaching out to those. Reach out. You're giving. You're extending yourself. It makes you, because you always act when you're full.
Patience.
Patience. Because why? Good. Because.
Well, because being patient means being kind.
Being what?
Kind.
Kind. Okay. So, in other words, you have to see where the other is coming from. Where are they coming? What standpoint is the other person coming from? If I'm impatient, I would just say, "Nah, you should be like this." But I need time to reflect, to talk to them and see where they're coming from. Okay, patience. And we also
Mind also, patience, because you get very unsteady of impatience.
yeah.
So it gives you peace of mind.
Yeah, it gives you peace of mind, because sometimes we want, right, this mentality of instant results. But as we've seen, the world doesn't work like that. Sometimes you have to wait 5, 10 years for actual results. Who can wait 5 to 10 years? Come on. Yeah, come on. Yeah. What's up? Okay, great. You've already been. Yeah, right. You've already been waiting 10 years.
Full attention in whatever I do.
Okay, so alertness, and I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with the situation. So alertness.
Be natural.
Huh?
Be natural. Being natural.
Natural. Right.
That is for me an important thing, to be relaxed and just be natural, not.
Right. So you've collapsed all of those pressures, how things should be. Authentic. Being authentic. Okay. So what is authentic? Authentic. In other words, what I am is what I am here is what I am out here. There's no incongruence. How I am here with you now is exactly how I am at home. There's no special Andre here, special Andre. It's just one person wherever you go. That's called authentic.
Working on your binding desires, like you're
Ye-
using
good.
intelligent way of
Good.
managing your mind.
And how do you work with your binding desires? You ask yourself, binding desires, you ask yourself one question: what's the cost of continuing for this desire to hold me? What's the cost of doing this one more time? The moment you ask this, you bring some perspective. What's the cost of 5 years more of this? And you will see that it's not going to be a good sign. Therefore, the moment you understand it's going to bring you pain, it reduces that binding desire. That's how binding desires survive for so long, because we've attached so much pleasure to them. But when I see the cost, wow, no, I don't want to be like this in 5 years. Okay?
Good sleep.
Yeah, definitely. So good sleep, food, sleep, food.
One thing, and is do things that makes you happy, give you energy.
Yeah, so this would be personal hobbies.
Yes.
Okay. Personal hobbies. One from you? Yeah, if you have it.
No,
Yeah, they're great, right?
I would say move mindfully, but I think yoga is already.
Yeah, okay. So mindfulness, in other words, deliberate being with the situation. Super.
Living Artha Kama Dharma in a healthy
In a healthy way, right? In other words, they're subserving goal of moksha, right? So healthy, right? Healthy. I'm going to put Artha, Kama, Dharma, and they subserve moksha. Okay.
And I think not to be afraid to search God, to search in yourself when you need it. You know, when you feel anxiety or you feel unsecure, or just try to look inside and don't be afraid to ask.
Okay.
For help.
Okay, good. So asking for help, acknowledging and asking for help. Acknowledge, and ask help.
Being focused.
Sorry?
Being focused.
Being focused. We have focused here. Karin also said.
I do not practice it, but I miss it on the plate. Sport.
Oh yeah.
Physical, the physical condition.
Sleep, food. I'll put here sports. Yeah. Yeah. It can be mental sports even, like chess. Who likes chess? No, they don't.
Living up to your own swadharma, not to the one of your neighbor.
Giving up your what?
Living up to
Your own swadharma. Yeah, that's authenticity. So swadharma. So the word swa means your own, and dharma means your own path, your own, in reference to where you are. Swa dharma. So your swadharma, your duty with your parents will be different than duty with your children. So that's swadharma. The duty always changes in reference to different people in the world.
Don't fight with your partner.
Yeah. No fighting.
Listen to your wife.
That's like everything, right? No Kurukshetra. Okay, very nice one.
We have discipline on the list already.
Yeah, we have discipline. As Simon said, discipline. So day to day.
Get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, getting out of your comfort zone. Yeah.
Is there also a place for playing like that?
Wait. Getting out comfort zone. Huh?
Play, a place for play.
Yeah, place for play. Okay, that's also sports here. Play.
That's not play.
I think she means a playing attitude. Like a playfulness, lightfulness.
Playfulness. Yeah, cheerfulness. Yeah. So that's actually a product of all of this, right? So can you really practice cheerfulness? Yeah. So okay. What does it take to bring cheerfulness into your life? All of this. Should we put cheerfulness here? Can you practice cheerfulness? Is that authentic to practice cheerfulness? Or just to be a naturally cheerful person? Yeah.
I think it's our nature in one way.
Yeah. So this means we have to unload those pumpkins and cucumbers, and then your cheerfulness flourishes. Okay. But I understand what you're saying. Cheerfulness is something that ensues naturally. I just don't feel comfortable putting, otherwise it becomes like positive thinking. Yeah, kind of.
Maybe not to taking yourself too seriously. Then in a way it's kind of, you are being playful with things, like the Deva.
Right.
I'm very, very proud of his qualities.
Right.
So proud that he already forgot that this is not his.
Okay, I'm going to put that together with cheerfulness. So not taking yourself too seriously, / cheerfulness. Not too serious, cheerful. Cheerful as in finding, the beauty in life. In Sanskrit, we call this pratipaksha bhavana. This means for every negative thought, which is kind of like the nature of the mind, you find an opposing thought. Because we're so used to constantly finding negative. So you deliberately, again, we have deliberate thinking, deliberately find a positive thought. Only because the nature of the mind, right, creates automatically a right, a black, like a gray, dark cloud. So you have to deliberately bring a cloud that is lighter.
So if you have a positive thought, should you then think a negative thought?
Yeah, so Pratipaksha Bhavana is,
It's the opposite, no?
yeah, so Pratipaksha Bhavana is, just to train your mind to come up with some creative ideas, some creative, lighter thinking. So in this case, I would put cheerfulness / Pratipaksha Bhavana, opposing thought, thinking of an opposing thought. So if I put you into a box, I have to immediately think, wait, but what is good? What inspires me about this person? They have dedication. They know what it takes to hold themselves amidst suffering. This I can learn from. Yes. And they're like spaghetti, aren't they? You take one value or you pick up all of the other values right along with them. So take one value and practice it. Is this what you want to say?
Yes, I for myself, I practice gratitude every day, every evening at the end of the day, to look what I'm grateful for.
So gratitude, we have gratitude.
It's already there.
It's already. Who said gratitude? It was somewhere here. Gratitude, yeah.
Doing japa.
Yeah, doing japa is a practice. So this is under yoga. I'm going to put here japa. I have a few here. You guys are amazing. You took everything. You like all of the ideas. I only have one, and I learned this a long time ago when I was about 17. I learned something called Teachability Index, and Teachability Index means you have to know what is your, on one side, motivation to learn, motivation to change. And on the other side, we have willingness to learn on one side and willingness to accept change on the other side. And I thought it was a very nice indicator to see where you're at, how much are you able to learn. So I'm going to put a scale here, willingness to learn and accept change. So suppose you want to learn a lot, right? You're so open to learning, and we say 0 to 10, how willing are you to learn, to discover, right, new things? 10. Now, what is your willingness to accept change, to actually change? 0. 10 times 0 equals 0. Therefore, it gives an illusion, an impression that I'm here learning, but underneath, I don't want to change. Therefore, one has to ask themselves, how 0 to 10 am I willing to learn something new? Whether it's a 10, I don't know, but suppose it's an 8. What is my willingness to accept change, to actually let myself be transformed? Suppose it's 8. And therefore, you can assess how well you're able to. And you can now apply prayer. Prayer, where do we have some? Here, prayer. May my willingness to learn skyrocket. May my willingness to change skyrocket, oh Lord. You always have prayer to bring any one of these values into your life. Okay? Look at this. Collaboration, group work.
Bit of homework now.
That feels quite up to date, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's okay. So what we want to show is that growth is multidimensional. It's not just take one and go with it. It is so much is incorporated into one's life. And this is what Vedanta is about. Not just awareness. This is it. This is real world work. How long? Last breath. Not just for the student, the teacher too. No one's exempt from this. And this is what makes you constantly improve, little by little by little by little. And you have the living proof there. Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam eva avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.